Hi, class. We're going into week 2 of the course, and I wanted to speak on our opening theme of determining agency personnel needs and creating appropriate job postings. This is pretty tricky stuff. On one hand, you do have your experience with previous employees in those roles, and presuming that you are posting for a replacement position, you always have that template to work from, the previous duties that were required of that position historically. However, what makes that more challenging is that very often positions do change, and there's a kind of a dynamic and an accelerating dynamic. For example, with increasing automation and computerization, database development and such, a lot of the work that had originally been, in essence, dealing with filing, managing files, and maintaining files is changing, and you no longer have to spend a large proportion of time with file management. It's shifting to database management and beyond. And that moves us to, again, a general trend with many positions where historically now, this is over the past generation, frankly, middle management has in many cases collapsed. Organizations have become more flattened, which means that what were historically lower echelon positions where you had fairly rigorous supervision are now in themselves mini management positions, and people in those positions are expected to have some qualities of initiative, of technical skill, and in being able to interpret the work that they're doing, not simply filing in a mindless way, but being able to read and organize the data within in an effective way is now a larger part of a job. So you have to now anticipate that you need to incorporate that into your job positions and job descriptions. So the tendency is for us to hire in the here and now, that we have a position opening, we need to fill it, and we often will simply unreflexively, or reflexively I should say, unreflectively, try to fill that position with somebody who is like the person who had that position before. But as I said, things are dynamic, things are moving forward, and you have to anticipate changes in positions and perhaps even revisit whether you need those positions as they are written at all. And that's where, again, you get into this idea of the mini management elements that you need and those qualities that are needed in order to successfully fulfill that kind of position. So you do have to, I think, use the opportunity that comes with job openings to reevaluate what it is you really want out of your people and people in those roles. It may not be simply making things more the way they are now than ever before, that you have the opportunity to shift into perhaps a higher level, greater levels of sophistication in those positions. There's another challenge, and I'll just speak to this briefly, which is a generational one, that positions that were highly recursive, people, that was labor, that was, certainly work. It's not the kind of thing most people like to do. And at the risk of treading into areas of stereotype, nonetheless, these are things that used to kind of gender out, in part because recursive work seems to be more highly tolerated by females than males. This is why factory assembly lines tend to be staffed by females. There was just something very deep, and at the risk of getting very anthropological about this, there has been a role assigned to females historically where they are doing recursive work. Housekeeping is an example of recursive work. And so there is a development or an expectation of that role on both sides. Now, as I said, things are changing. A lot of that recursive work is now automated, but that hardly means that a feminization trend is blunted, because the other thing that happens, and again, at the risk of expressing something that sounds either stereotypical or biased, there is a literature that bears this out, that females are better at relationship management, and that becomes a bigger part and a growing part that we see in organizations, that the ability to organize and work both internally with relationships and then externally as well, because many of our work is service oriented, and this opens things up again and tends to favor a feminine viewpoint, let me just put it that way. So it explains to some extent, in my view, and I think there's literature on this, it's not uninformed, we do see that many government positions are becoming, and I'm talking about at managerial levels, are becoming feminized. So we can see that trend continuing because of that capacity at relationship management, among other things. It's not just one thing. So those become qualities that one then has to look for or maybe anticipate in a job description. I mentioned before that we also have a generational issue, and you have to know that younger people have a different attitude about work and jobs, certainly different from your parents and your generation, and that continues to shift. And it's good to understand that going in, because otherwise you may be taken aback or surprised by the values that are held by a generation other than yours. And if you can come to some understanding and understand where they're kind of literally coming from in terms of their own experiences, then you can at least find some common ground as you enter into the hiring process, the development process, and the establishment of roles that, again, may be different and shift generationally. So that's where I'll leave it for now. You have some readings along these lines, and that'll also help to inform you. We'll carry on with some of these themes through this week. Thanks.